Hello and welcome to a tutorial on how to make this cool particle effect. First, we have to delete the light and the cube. We have to add in the emitter object, and we'll add the particles within this object, so in the volume. Go to the particles tab, add the new particle system, and a source volume, and the rest is okay. As for the lifetime, maybe select 500 or so, it doesn't really matter. And the end frame for when the particles, well, all particles will be spawned, will maybe be 50, it's up to you. I put my simulations always around 100,000 on these things, but for this tutorial I will go for 10,000, so it doesn't really slow my computer down that much. Then go to the field weights and turn the gravity down so the particles don't fall down. And if we play this now, we see they're all spawning within the sphere, and that's what we want. Now, to look through the sphere, we have to go to the object settings and under viewport displayed as bounce, and in the bounce settings go to sphere, and now we can see through the icosphere. Now we have to add the object to attract the particles to. I will add torus, rotate it so it looks good for the camera, and under the simulations, the physics tab, go to force field and add a harmonic force field setting. For the strength, I think 0.25 looks good, dampening maybe 0.75, and rest length is just good when it's 0. Now we want sphere to be transparent, but the particles themselves to be rendered. So for the sphere material itself, we have to go to shading and change your render engines to Eevee. For the sphere, add a new material and just make it transparent. And add a transparent node to the volume. Now we have to add an object to render the particles as. You can add a halo, but I think that doesn't work with Eevee, but it does work with cycles. Now to add a very light object to render, add a cone and set the vertices to 3, the minimum, and the depth to 1. Place it behind the camera so you don't see it in the render. And now we will make a material for it. Select it, press new material, and add an emission shader, put it on the surface, a color ramp for the color, and change this to some cool colors. I chose red and blue, but that's up to you to decide. And add a mapping node, so you have more controls on the particles and you can animate it. And add an object info and get the location of every particle to decide which color it will be. That's the material for this object, and now we have to say to the particle system to render every particle as that object. So go to the particles tab and under render select object, and as the instance object select what we just made, and that is a cone, and we selected that. Yes. If we save it and play the animation, we see all the particles go to the torus, they all spawn in. I forgot to put a shape on surface, so if we do this, we don't get this weird effect where they all go to the center. But instead, go on the outer surface. Now we have to extend the simulation limits. And now we can hide this and also make sure it doesn't get rendered. And we have the particles in the right place, we have the object, and if you render this now, after we put the world color to black and the strength down to 0, I think that looks better. We can render it and we get something like this. Now the objects are way too large, and to change that you have to go to the render tab again, the render settings, and put the scale down to 0.05. I think looks good, and render it again. And there you have it, a cool particle simulation. Now if you render this, make sure to first bake the simulation to your cache and maybe add more particles, and you bake it by pressing this button, and then you render it and select Eevee for the render settings. And I think you can leave everything off. I tested it, and it doesn't really matter what you add here, that it just only adds extra render time and it doesn't look better. And that's it, that's the tutorial. Thank you for watching, and maybe see you next time in the next tutorial. Bye. Also, this tutorial is just one way to make one scene, but you can get very creative with this and do way more things, like change the object which attracts the particles, or make the emitter different, or use a totally different particle effect. And get creative with this. It's very fun to make these simulations. They aren't very hard to make. And yeah, get creative. Be a Blender artist. Bye.